Thanks for coming, everybody. Just pause this for a second. I'm going to do a quick plug for this new documentary that's coming up. It's based in New York. It's mainly Federa and Sadowski, but we're in it too, with some interviews and some shop footage. And if you pre-order the download or buy the DVD, you can enter to win an NG3 plastering. And so there's some really cool prizes. There's some Sadowski gear and some Federa gear as well. So check that out beneath the baseline. I'll just let this roll. And then once we're finished that, Felipe is going to come up and do a quick demo for us. And if you don't know him, Felipe is an amazing bass player as well as an adventure bicyclist. He just finished a tour of Russia, and he was a keynote speaker in Moscow on winter riding, which is something he's very good at, and he'll have some stories about that as well. But first, beneath the baseline, here we go.
A lot is discussed about finding your own sound, finding your style, finding your personality, finding your individuality. You already have that. You just have to grow into it.
If you're playing on somebody else's song and you're trying to bring the song to life and at the same time not get in the way of the song, that's like the craft. To try to find that part.
I'm always trying to refine my sound. With every Rage record, with Audio Slave, with what I'm doing now, it's always a search.
It's the tone that you're looking for, it's the sound, it's the relationship between sounds. That's what either makes sense or it doesn't, you know?
That's what I love about this instrument. You have so many different areas to cover. It's just a piece of wood with frets on it, but everywhere I go, people have different versions of the way they approach it. I saw Billy Gibbons open for Alice Cooper in 1974, I think it was, New Year's Eve, Buffalo, New York. And Billy Gibbons, first time I saw that, we couldn't believe our eyes. We were sitting real close, and I was actually in the shadow of his hat. He had a Texas hat on. Anyway, we looked at it, like, unbelievable, did you see this? And I went home and, I can't believe this works.
I don't look at it as people going, oh, practice. Practice sounds like a work to me. We want to practice. No, it's different. If I don't play, I just feel empty.
The main thing is to listen and be aware of what everybody else is doing.
You know, this is like, bam, check this out, y'all. You know, if it feels good to you, if it makes sense to you, take it and do something else with it.
I started off just kind of extending what I've been writing for miles into my own thing, you know what I mean? And then gradually start to find my, my own voice.
The people down at the end of the street had a Sears Telstar 4-string bass, short scale, horrible sounding bass, buzzed on every fret. I thought it was the greatest thing in life.
The electric bass has expanded in quantum leaps.
So all this slapping and thumping stuff for me is rhythmic. I think drums.
What it was like being in Guns N' Roses. That's a huge story.
For me, it happened overnight. I saw a bass player, Lawrence Contour, play a gig in Croydon in South London on a Sunday lunchtime. Monday morning, I went out and bought a bass and never looked back.
So, you can either write that down or you can go to our Facebook page and there's a link there. I like what John Patitucci said. His first bass was a piece of crap, but it didn't matter. He enjoyed playing it so much. And how many here had a first bass that was just terrible? Or a first guitar? Yeah, did it stop you? No, it just makes you a better player. Felipe. And after we finish going through the educational portion, we've got all kinds of bases here for people to try. We have amps in each corner, so 4 people can be playing at a time, and then I'll replay these videos as well, because there's some interesting stuff if you missed it.
Do you want to say something about this bass, Sheldon?
Sure. This is an NG, well, it's 2 new things for this year. NG3, so a 3rd pickup and an NG2, sorry. And it's our first 6-string in the NG line. And there's some interesting things that went on here. Had to redesign the string tree because there wasn't one available that was the right length, that was the right look, that was the right angle. And there's a 3D printing company in Saskatoon, 3D Cafe, I think they're called. They're just on Circle Drive there. And so we had them print these prototypes, and they did a great job. They won't be like that for production, but for prototype purposes, it was really cool. So we got to use some new technology in these. It's the same dark glass preamp, and these are the new Hipshot saddles that we worked with with Hipshot on them, and that's about it.
Feels really light compared to the average 6-string bass, I think.
It'd be about 9 pounds.
Yeah. But we was playing the Warwick that killing has like 10 kilos. So this is my first time playing this bass. I'm gonna play something for you guys. I think you did too.
Yeah.
We had there's all the stores, all the bases in the world, they're in one place, right? So, but when I moved to Saskatoon, somebody told me, hey, down the road there's a guy that sells guitars. So I went to see guitars, and then it's like, oh, it's Dingwall. It's not guitars, it's bass guitars, the big guitars. And what made me fall in love with Dingwalls is like, do you know the response on the frequencies, like for the low end to the high end? As me, as a tapper, you know, tapping, I want that piano feeling when I play, and I think it's just because the magnitude of the instrument, right? Like everything that Sheldon have designed, it's really responsive, right? Usually you get like one frequency that doesn't really sound in some basses, or the low end or the high end. This is really, it's everything there. It's all there. Should I play one more song, Sheldon?
Sure, sure.
Make that louder.
I don't think I mentioned that he takes his bass with him when he does that.
Yeah, you guys should see my first bass. I probably have it for 10 years, I think.
Yeah, something like that.
Something like that. It's probably the most weared out Dingwall out there. Looks like a map. Scratches all over.
Four-wheel drive.
But you know what? I get that question all the time about is the action move slots, and I haven't found it yet. Like after a tour, it will be 3 months. I did in the Arctic. I just came from Russia, and I always been able to get out of the plane or get out of the bicycle and just play the show. I haven't taken it to a hot weather place here yet, so I don't know. But in the cold, it's just no problem.
Guitars are they're made out of natural materials, just like humans, and so as long as the guitar is in the same sort of environment that you can survive in, it will survive in that as well. If you were to stick yourself in a trunk on a hot summer day, you probably wouldn't survive, and your guitar probably wouldn't either. But if it's you know, relatively between, let's say, 40 degrees Celsius and minus 40, it'll be fine. Your finish, though, if you've got a thick finish like this one, you want to keep it out of the real cold temperatures, and if you can't avoid that, then you want to make sure you don't open up your case like this, or you'll see your finish just shatter in front of your eyes. And that's just a factor of thick finishes, thick plastic finishes on wood. That's what they do. Okay, so read something interesting. It was Jack White talking about how he switched from his old plastic, what are they, Skyline guitars from the 60s. He switched from those to modern guitars. And the reason was he didn't realize that you don't have to fight your guitar. You heard Eddie Van Halen talking about how the Wolfgang was designed to not fight. It was designed to play easily. And I think that's really important. I think your instrument should be a partner in your music. It should not be a dysfunctional partner in your music, making you fight to be able to play your instrument. And so your setup is going to be different than your setup, because you two play differently, I assume. Ed, your setup is going to be completely different than Kalen's setup. And so the perfect setup is not necessarily a set of measurements, it's adjusting the instrument to work for you. Now if you play lots up in the upper frets, then you'll need to adjust for that. If you play mainly down here, then you can raise the action and adjust the truss rod so it's easy to play here, but it plays really cleanly. And we'll get to that in a second here. But essentially, it starts with fresh strings. As you're playing, stuff's coming off your fingers, oils. Those oils are attracting dust, and maybe there's some skin that rubs off and gets caught in the windings. And what that'll do is that'll make the string heavier where you're playing the most. So if you're playing down here the most, as your strings get older, they're collecting all this oil and this dirt, and they're actually getting heavier here, but they're not getting heavier here. And this string needs to be consistent all the way along its length, otherwise it starts to sound funny and it doesn't intonate properly. So if you're going to set up your instrument, start with a fresh set of strings. What you can do to get a little bit of extra life out of your strings is, and to get rid of some of that, that gunk, this won't bring them back 100%, but you can just detune, let's say 4 half turns, and then, and that'll shake some of the crud out. Bass strings are expensive, so if you can make them go an extra week or two to get by, that'll do it for you. All right, so the next thing is tuning. And tuning is interesting because there's all kinds of friction points. I might as well just grab this bass again. There's all kinds of friction points. The gears have friction in them. They have slop in them. They have to have slop in them. There's friction here at the nut. If there's a string tree, there's another point of friction. So as you're tuning, it's common to tune down to a note, but that leaves slack in the gears and friction here at the nut. So if you're tuning up to the note and you go too far, don't tune back down to the note, tune below the note and then come back up to pitch. And then that'll tension everything nicely for you. You'll stay in much better tune that way. So don't come down to the note, go below it, and then always come back up. Okay. I haven't noticed this ever with guitars, but with bass strings, it's pretty common. You get a brand new set of strings, and one of them will sound funny, and it won't intonate properly. And if you think about it, what's going on is what you're seeing on the outside, that's not carrying any tension. There's a single core wire that's going down the middle of the string, and then to give it some mass to slow down the vibration, they wrap more wire around it. And that wire is basically trying to pop off the center of the core. And if it does, then it sounds like a maraca. It's got a really high-pitched sort of buzz to it. And it sounds terrible. There'll be no sustain. Most likely your string is going to be ruined right out of the package. But there's one thing you can try, and this might save the string, and that is to loosen it up